કેટલું ઇન્ફ્લુઅન્સ હોઈ શકે છે ગુજરાતીઓનું જે તે ક્ષેત્રમાં?
ત્યાં માઇક છે તમારું.
તમારો સવાલ ગુજરાતીઓ પ્રત્યે મર્યાદિત છે?
બિલકુલ નહીં.
ઇન્ડિયન્સ વિશે કહું.
ભીખુભાઈ, આપણે તો ગ્લોબલ ગુજરાતી છીએ.
સોરી,
ગ્લોબલ ગુજરાત છે એટલે ગુજરાતીઓ પૂરતું મર્યાદિત નથી. અને સવારે જ વાત થઈ ને કે જ્યાં જ્યાં વસે ગુજરાતી ત્યાં સદાકાળ ગુજરાત, અને એતે કેવો ગુજરાતી જે હો કેવડ ગુજરાતી, એટલે વિશ્વ માનવ.
now I am going to talk. Can you hear me now? I am going to talk about the Indian diaspora.
Okay.
And the question, we have had some discussions in the morning. I think one or two were mistaken in their facts. Others are different. And what I thought I would do is to give you a sketch of what has happened to our people during the last 140 years that we have been traveling. Indians were taken as indentured laborers throughout the 18th century, but certainly until 1836 when that was stopped. After that, slavery was abolished. For all these reasons, we needed an extra pool of labor. And they found that not in the Japanese. They recruited Japanese, but they suffered from beriberi. They tried Portuguese, and they finally settled on Indians. And this is very striking historically. What did they think of us? In order for a group to say these guys can come as indentured laborers, which means 5-year contract, they come, we give them land, they can till it, and then at the end of 5 years, either they go back or they stay on. Why did they think of, what did they think of us to be worthy of being indentured laborers? But anyway, as a result of that kind of movement, then movement to the States, Kuwait and all those places, we are about 25 million people all over the world. We are in, can you hear me?
Yeah, થોડુંક નજીક.
We are 25 million people roughly. We are settled in 28 countries. We are settled in about 44 countries, but mainly in 28. In no country are we in a majority except one, which is Mauritius. And in different countries, we have followed different histories, different patterns. Some years ago, I was invited to address a conference on the Indian diaspora, which was chaired by Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And I thought, I'll write it all out. So I wrote out my speech, and I was reading it just before coming here. And I was struck by the fact that, which I mentioned in that lecture, that Indians settled in 44 countries, significantly in 23. What was their history like? Where did they come from? What gods and goddesses did they take? What gods and goddesses did they drop? What is the area of life to which an immigrant always wants to cling? Look at yourself and look at myself. After 2 generations, 3 generations, what is common between you and your great-great-grandchildren? And the surprising thing is, we thought there were 4 possibilities. Dress is one possibility. Second is love of music. You like to hear music and then it continues in generations. The other is food. And we discovered that food was the constant. Your children and grandchildren, once they are accustomed to it, would love Indian food. You don't have to worry about it. Although that doesn't make them Indian, but that at least initiates them into Indian culture. In terms of politics, some of these countries produce Indians, Gujaratis, as senior politicians. South Africa was one of the finest countries which produced first-class Indian political leaders who went to jail with Nelson Mandela and other things. This hasn't happened in almost any other country. If you look at Malaysia, if you look at Sri Lanka, if you look at Pakistan or West Indies, you don't find Indians in prominent positions. They always want to do business quietly, send their children to private education, and hope that that will give them a platform to take off. That has been the thesis. With the result that if you look at our people, that constant tendency to make money, but not money for its own sake, as they would do here. Money in order to pass it on to the children and then give them as a starter. So for all these reasons, our people lost some gods. I can give you examples of which gods we lost in Trinidad, which is a fascinating country. If you look at Trinidad, Tobago, and Jamaica, we lost various gods, but we restored some others, like Kali. Kali became a very popular goddess in Jamaica. It was also very striking that Indian male, especially a Hindu male, was always afraid of a black colleague. Why? Why was a Hindu young man of this young man's age, 25, 26, always afraid of a black man? And that's because he thought that the black man was going to steal his woman. That was one of the deepest fears our people had. That the black man, more formal, more charming, more ecstatic, more romantic, would take away our wife and leave us alone. So that kind of fear we always had. Even now, in some countries, that fear remains. So then, if you look at the history of the West, if you take different countries, you get different patterns. I don't want to talk about the States, because most of you know it. Don't want to talk about England. I know it quite well, but you also know something about England. I want to talk about those parts of the world which we tend to forget and which haunt us. And when we talk about immigrants, we forget that we created a second class of citizens, the untouchables, if you like, whom then we sent abroad and we care for them carefully. Take the West Indies. West Indies, our people were recruited and sent to work as indentured laborers. Now naturally you can't have men alone, you must have women. So the British say there will be 5 women for 20 men. Just think for a second. What does it take somebody to think like this, that we will allow 5 women for 20 men, which they did, and what was the result? The result was that a woman can fool around with all of them. It also meant that she became manipulative. She became the stronger party because she knew that she was stronger than the male. The result of that was the entire family values got topsy-turvy in the West Indies. Not the values of India, where wife can be, the husband is patriarch, the wife obeys and all that kind of thing. In the West Indies, a total transformation, and family values became quite different to what we think now. With the result that in 1870 and 1880, the government of the West Indies began to worry about the decline of the family. So brought in strict rules. If a woman was found fooling around, she is in jail. If a man was doing this kind of thing, he is in jail. Strict rules, with the result that since 1940-50, this value structure has changed. And if you have a West Indian friend, and if you talk to him, you will get the feeling of what I am saying. So that's broadly about what happened in the West Indies. South Africa, the story was quite different. It's the only part of the world where we were politically active, like Yadu and Mahatma Gandhi and others.
Yeah.
Jamaica, again, we were active. In Malaysia, we were active. But in other countries, we simply remained passive. What was the consequence of that? And that is beautifully put by a man called Mohandas Gandhi. He put it beautifully because in South Africa, he was fighting against the unjust laws which require Indian marriages to be registered. So people who would go from here to South Africa, husband and wife, the government said, you must register your marriages. And Indians said, this is unacceptable. You don't even ask your slave to do this. We are married, but my passport says this, nothing more than that. But no, the government insisted. Gandhi led a protest. He expected a lot of people to follow him. They didn't. because many of them were doing a quiet deal with the officers. They were giving money and getting a register. Gandhi realized that his people as he called them, were not going to stand by him and fight with him. With the result that he made a remark which I want you to remember. Have I gone on too long? Just 1 minute.
Yeah. So what we can do?
Let me just finish this remark.
Yeah.
At which point Gandhi got unbelievably angry for the first time in his life. And he said, when shall we learn to rebel against ourselves? Just look at the sentence. When shall we learn to rebel against ourselves? આપણે માટી જેવા છીએ એની સામે આવા પ્રકૃતિ સામે ઉભા રહેવાની શક્તિ કેમ નથી આપણામાં? And then he went further. The next sentence. If you behave like a worm, don't blame others for trampling on you.
Very well said.
કીડા તરીકે તમારે જીવવું હોય તો સામો માણસ તમારા પર પગ મૂકવાનો. વાંક તમારો છે કે તમે પેલાને ટેમ્પ્ટ કર્યો. એ માણસને ટેમ્પ્ટ જ ના થાય તમારી સામે કોઈ જાતની છૂટછાટ લેવાની. જો તમે કહો કે ના મારી લક્ષ્મણ રેખા છે, આ મારી મર્યાદા છે. એટલે ગાંધીજીનો અનુભવ સાઉથ આફ્રિકામાં છેલ્લે સુધી when shall we learn to rebel against ourselves?
પણ ભીખુભાઈ કદાચ આ જ ઘટના હતી કે જ્યાંથી શરૂઆત થઈ કે ગુજરાતીઓ વિદેશની ધરતી ઉપર પણ વિરોધ કરી શકે છે, સત્ય માટે લડી શકે છે.
ચારે બાજુ
આશીષભાઈ તમને પૂછીશ કે સત્ય સામે લડી શકે છે.
ગુજરાતીઓ જે છે ગુજરાતી, look, take places where there are Gujaratis and other people from India. Take South Africa. Gujaratis, Tamils, Telugus and Muslims. Now what is the pattern of every one of them? Where are the Gujaratis? Mainly in banks. When I went to South Africa, I was struck. Every bank you go to are our people. Business, trade. Blacks were working on the farms which our people owned. That happens with Gujaratis.
બરાબર.
Mainly Gujaratis.
અન્ય લાક્ષણિકતાઓની ગુજરાતીઓની વાત કરીએ. આશીષભાઈ તમને પૂછીશ કે જે રીતે તમે પોતાનું ગ્રુપ ચલાવો, ફાઉન્ડર છો ઓફ મારા ગ્રુપના, બિઝનેસ ઓપોર્ચ્યુનિટી કેવી રીતે શોધી અને કેવી રીતે આટલો ડેવલપ કરી શક્યા?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Firstly, I'd like to thank Sunil Bhai and Profil Bhai Naik, Susmit and the team at Ayana, also Barun Das and the team at TV9 for this phenomenal setup. And really, I'd like to salute your passion for holding this, really the promotion of Gujaratis globally and bringing that, as Sunil Bhai said, removing the coconut nuss of all of us. I think it's a brilliant thing. And I've been personally quite lucky because my spiritual leader, Morari Bapu, has, with his teaching of Satya, Prem and Karuna, has kept me very connected with Gujarat and India. He's made me very, very proud to be a Gujarati and to be an Indian. And obviously, getting married to Krishna, my wife, who's in the crowd, has made me even more so proud to be Gujarati, who's from Gujarat. But Amara family, 1890, we left Gujarat and we went to East Africa. So when you think about, my ancestors traveling purely for entrepreneurial opportunities, it's quite amazing.
I'll interrupt you for a moment. Vikubhai, his story is, from rags to riches. But interestingly, I thought that seldom you will find, dropouts will become the richest person in the world. For example, Bill Gates or Steve Jobs. Here is a story that he is a dropout and still he has become one of the richest men. So that is the, I think, very inspirational story that we want to hear from you, because time is a constraint, but that is the most interesting story that we want to hear from you. From a refugee, you have become the richest man. Tell us that story. Huh? Yes.
Sure. So basically, my family went through the 1972 Idi Amin saga in Uganda, and got wiped out, moved to England, started again, and then in 1993 we moved to Rwanda. 9 months later, unfortunately, the genocide broke out, so my parents, my sister and I were refugees during the genocide for 35 of the 100 days. Luckily came out okay, but unfortunately lost everything again. So we started from scratch, and I quit school when I was 15 years old, took a $5,000 loan and set up the business about 25, 26 years ago. Over this journey, over 26 years, we've created 16 different businesses in 26 African countries, created 30,000 jobs in the process. But I think more importantly, I think, wealth creation is definitely important, but alongside that, I think creating a positive social impact is equally important. And this is why I chair the United Nations Global Entrepreneurship Council, and very focused on how we really make sure, in line with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, that we leave no one behind in a true manner. And I think, and Bapu teaches us this as well, but positivity attracts positivity. You do good and you will do well. If you give back, you will get back tenfold. So it's a matter of how you combine, and it's the best way to create a sustainable and self-sustainable and a scalable business in the real sense. So I think Africa is a phenomenal place for business, and Gujaratis, to Lord Zo's point, was that, Gujaratis have really penetrated a lot of these African countries. I mean, it's great to see an ambassador of Uganda to the United Kingdom who's a Gujarati who's here as well, and it's proud that we've got this kind of thing and we've been able to spread, but we don't forget our roots, which is the key thing. And thanks to events like this, even more so. So I would say, the biggest thing is that Africa, people talk about the challenges, people talk about corruption, people talk about more difficult, 54 different countries, but in my opinion, frankly, there are only going to be takers if there are givers. Private sector deva jai to elaka lese, right? આપણે ના દે તો એ સીધી રીતે ધંધો થઈ શકે છે.
ઓકે, વાત કરીએ ઓસ્ટ્રેલિયાની થોડી વાત કરીએ. આપણી સાથે ધાર્મિકા પણ છે.
Yes.
ધાર્મિકા, is there any problem you faced being a Guju girl or an Indian girl?
Is it a problem? Oh, sorry.
No, that's not a problem. Today is 15th October.
Oh, yes.
Today is 15th October, and incidentally that she is one of the finest researcher based out of Australia, and her area of expertise is in breast cancer, and today the whole world is celebrating Breast Cancer Awareness Day. So we are lucky that, on this day we have such a good scientist available to us. So Dharmika, I just wanted to know, because during lunch session and afterwards we were discussing in India we have started early detection and breast cancer awareness activities, and we find that every year the incidence of almost 1 lakh more cases are added. So I just want, and Indian scientists could not find out the reason. What is the reason or cause of this breast cancer? Some people, there are certain myths that if you consume more oral contraceptives or infertility treatment, or if you don't have children, or if there is no breastfeeding, then that may cause this breast cancer. So as an expert, I want to understand from you that what is the reason, because there are a lot of myths. So what is reality? And another thing, that what is the protocol in Australia? For example, in India, after 30 years you start sonography, then mammography every second year, and after 50 years every year you should undergo mammography and other things. So what is the protocol for early detection and creating awareness in the society in nutshell?
Sure. And I just want to say thank you as well for having me here today. I would start with the first part, which is, what causes cancer? That's a very heavy question, Bai. Cancer, we still really don't know the root cause, but we know a few things about the way that it behaves. So we know that it can happen at any time for lots of different people. It can be triggered by different things in environment or lifestyle, but we can't pinpoint and say...
Maybe stress also.
Yes, that's exactly right. So it's a holistic piece, right? It's your mental health, it's your physical health, it's your environmental health. And I think at the end of the day, we have to go back to the core of our human bodies, which is our immune system, right? So balancing your immune system means living a really holistic, clean life, like doing things that are good for you and bring out the best in you. And so that's what I think we should look at when we think about cancer. It's not necessarily, we don't know enough to know what it's always triggered by, especially with breast cancer. You can have women who have lumps in their breast, but they'll die of a heart attack. It doesn't, you know, dictate how one might pass away. The important thing with cancer, because we don't know what it is we must detect it early. And so that's why when we go out there and we're promoting women to go out and get tested early, the main reason is because we can't fight it unless we detect it early. And so there are lots of reasons why that doesn't happen in different cultures, but also in Australia, we start testing women from the age of 40 with the current gold, what they call the gold standard, which is mammography. It can't be used for women under the age of 40 because of breast density. So it doesn't work as well in younger women, and therefore we only start screening from the age of 40 unless you have a family history. So women under the age of 40 have one tool. That tool is this. It is your hand. And if you can detect it with that, then that's what we get. So that's why I was motivated to develop something else. And sure, it was a bit of an accident how I came about it, but the reason to keep on trying to develop it was very strong.
Thank you so much. આપણે જોયું જાણ્યું કે કેવી રીતે રાજકીય ક્ષેત્ર હોય, મેડિકલ ક્ષેત્ર હોય કે ઉદ્યોગ જગત હોય, આ ત્રણે ત્રણ ક્ષેત્રમાં કેવી રીતે ગુજરાતીઓ પોતાનું યોગદાન આપી રહ્યા છે વિદેશોમાં પણ. આ સેશન અહીંયા પૂરું કરીશું, પરંતુ નેક્સ્ટ સેશન ખૂબ જ ઇન્ટરેસ્ટિંગ રહેવાનું છે. ક્યાંય જતા નહીં, મળીએ એક નાનકડા વિરામ પછી. થેન્ક યુ સો મચ.
ગુજરાતની વાત છે, ગુજરાતીઓની વાત છે, ગુજરાતીઓને સન્માનવાની વાત છે અને વધુ કેટલાક ગ્લોબલ ગુજરાતીઓને સન્માનવાનો આ મોકો છે. એટલે હું મંચ પર આમંત્રિત કરવા માંગીશ એ તમામ મહાનુભાવોનો.